Okay, so now to get on with the front. I've already done one side of it because each side is the same as the other. The main thing to note, and if I just turn the truck upside down, is that the front axle is very fussy about which way it goes round. If you put it the wrong way around, the suspension simply won't work. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting these side pieces on here before we start trimming out. These act as both a template for the trimming as well as giving extra strength to the front. In order to know which way round is the right way, if you look at the top here, it isn't symmetrical and there's a little lump at the front, and that has to be at the front, and then the larger piece here is at the back. It's really important that it goes this way round. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by putting these pieces on, and we'll just use super glue for that. This is the glue which I'm using, which is just the basic Gorilla super glue which I get from my local supermarket. When the part goes on, these end pieces here simply align with the ends here. So it's actually going to go on something like that. Before I put the glue on, I'm just going to mark here so that I know how far back to put the glue. So let's get that stuck on, and we're going to do both sides. Don't need a massive amount of glue. And that should be okay. And then holding it at the back, we just move it into position. You don't get an amazing amount of time. Push it down firmly without sticking your fingers. That should be okay. Flip it over, do the other side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put some weight on it to make it absolutely flat, because we need these to be flat. That's it, because we need these to be very flat against the side for it to be a precise fit inside the suspension at the front, and you'll see that in a few minutes when we come to install it. So I'll just leave that to dry. Okay, while that's drying, I can turn my attention to the other end. The first thing that I'm going to do is to deal with the motor holder. So it's very similar to the back. You've got some bits in the back that you need to pick out so that the back of the motor can slot in nicely. Again, you need to make sure that you scrape out everything which is in there that shouldn't be, and go round this inside edge here where the front bearing on the motor slots in, giving that a good hard scrape, because any tiny bits in here will stop the motor from clicking in nicely. Check with the 3mm bit that we're all nice and clear. And I think that should be good. Taking the motor, and for the front, I actually like to have the wires pointing downwards because I want the wires to come out horizontally. So we'll just click that in, let's see if it goes. And then I'll just push this down absolutely flat. That's sitting flat, because if it isn't, we can have trouble getting this part on. So let's turn to this part here. So when it's printing, any parts which aren't in direct contact with the build surface are going to have supports put in by the printer, so we need to get rid of those. So there's one here, and making sure that we pick all of the parts off. You may find that you need to file this, you may not, we'll come to that in a minute. So there's one on that side, there's one on this side, and it just pulls off quite easily. There. and then there's a piece here that needs to come off too. Okay, so that's all nice and clean. We do have a hole here, and the way that I get rid of those is I've got a selection of tiny watchmakers type screwdrivers, just the cheap ones, and if you push it in one side of the hole and then push it in the other side of the hole and then go to the other side and do the same thing, it tends to release the part that the printer puts in for support when it's printing vertical holes. And then with a bit of luck it should just push out, that's it there, and scrape out any remaining bits that there are, and I can see that there's some here. It can be useful just to use a drill bit to get those out. Do it until the hole looks round. Now we can actually test this hole with the part that's going to go into it, and so this steering knuckle here is going to connect to the steering rack arm, if you like, that comes with the model, and if we push it in, it goes in, and we need to see that it's reasonably loose. Moving it backwards and forwards will actually release it anyway. If it's too tight, the steering won't centre properly and it'll be a bit frustrating. The servos will buzz. It's not the end of the world because it will eventually free up, but it will be a little bit frustrating. Just moving it backwards and forwards like this actually has the effect of loosening it fairly quickly. If it's too tight, you just go back in with a drill. When you're pulling this part out, if you just pull it like that, there is a danger that you can end up snapping this 3D printed part. So it's actually better to push this top bit in until it's flush and then very, very gradually bring it out. So I'm just going to loosen this a tiny bit more with the drill bit, and this is a 3mm bit I'm using, just to clean any little bits off the sides. Let's try that. That's how you want it, so that it's actually floppy and just swings around so that there's absolutely no friction there whatsoever, but it's tight enough not to have sloppy steering. Okay, so I'll take this out. The reason why it's slightly stiff as you pull it out is because there is actually a larger bit on the end of this piece sticking up in order to keep it in place on the original model. Okay, so that's that done. The next thing to do is to get this piece onto here. Now, I didn't mention it, but actually these hub carriers are actually marked left and right, and this one here which I'm holding, and I'm not sure if you can see it easily on the camera, but this has got a little R on it, and that means that it's the right hand one as you're looking from, if you like, behind the steering wheel. The other one which I put on has got a little L on it. So, taking my vise, and taking this part here, so bear in mind it's the right hand one, which means it's going to be this way around with the motor facing upwards. That is going to push over the front here. Now it will be a little bit stiff to go on. You can make that less so by trimming the corners with a knife if it's causing you real problems, but this isn't something which I intend to be taking on and off, so I don't feel too worried about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, get it the right way around so the letter R is facing upwards and this part here is facing inwards, and just get it to locate on the front there. It may just push on, but it's going to be stiff deliberately so. So what I found as the best way to get this to go on is to very gently push it with the little vise. Just doing a little bit at a time. All the way until we're flush at the end, so I'll keep going. That's good, so that's nice and flush here and the motor's on. Because we don't want these wires snapping and having to be resoldered and trying to get the thing apart, which can be difficult, I'm just going to get some glue on the back. So I'll just hold it loosely but firmly in the vise just to stop it moving around. Get the glue gun and pulling these wires upwards, I'm just going to get a bit in there, making sure it's sticking to the wire, and a bit in there. Try not to have too much excess, and then we just let that cool. If for any reason your wires do slap, the easiest thing to do is to probably snap off this back piece here, and you ought to be able to just solder the wires with the motor in place anyway. So I'll let that cool. Right, so the parts here have now gone off. I think that the super glue is dry enough for us to think about trimming this out here. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to use the Dremel and we're going to follow round the inside all the way around there, and we're also going to Dremel out this whole area here as well. Going to take the other motor off while we're doing it because there's going to be a lot of vibration. Just put that over there. I'll put this one out of the way too. Going to hold it in the vise just to make it easier to film, to be quite honest, and to keep things steady. Now, it doesn't matter if you accidentally cut off a little bit too much, but you want to roughly stay within the guidelines. Just going to trim this bit here where it seems to be sticking out. That's that side. Now I'll do the other side. That seems to be reasonable. You just want to make sure that there are no sharp edges left. And then I'm going to go in the top here and clear out all of the material because there's a little bar coming down. So I'll just do that. And now it's time to test it. So taking the motor holder which we made a couple of minutes ago, and bear in mind that that is the front, I'm looking at it from the back. This is the right hand one, so it's going to go over here. What we do is we just pop that in, like so. To see what the fit looks like. Now, if you're finding, as I am here, that it's actually moving around a little stiffly, you might be able to loosen it up, or you may, in fact, need to slightly trim these bits here in order to make sure that they fit in the hole properly. This is a little bit too tight, but I'm going to try waggling it to see if I can get it loose. But as I move this round here, I can feel that it's slightly touching here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the excess, and I think it's some of the black underneath, out just using a craft knife until it moves freely. If there was loads in there, I'd probably go back in with a Dremel, but I don't think that there's very much material needed to be got rid of. So I'm just going to try and do it with a knife. Let's try that. Well, it's going in. It still needs a little bit more, I would say. But we're only talking fractions of a millimetre really. Plus, you may find that you can achieve something just by trimming off the back of the motor holder if there's any excess 3D print there. So I'll just do that. Right, I can feel that there is absolutely nothing touching at all, so that is good. I'm still feeling that this is a little bit tight, so I'm going to pop it off. I'm going to have a quick look to see if I can see any material on there that shouldn't be, and then I'll just carefully give it a little trim on both sides. Now you can check these by putting them in the other side, like so. I can feel that this is the stiff one, so let's have a quick look. Let's try that. Better, it's not almost there. That feels nice and loose. Loose without wobbling around, that is. So let's just try that in there again. Okay, so we now have a freely moving but without wobbling around hub carrier. So remembering that the axle goes this way around with that little lump at the front. This is the right hand one. Motor facing upwards. That goes in there and it's moving nice and freely. And then we put the other one on, and this one, as I said before, is marked with an L, and that's going to go in there. Like so, and that's moving nicely. And then what we're going to do is we're going to post the wires through the back here and out here. So let's just do that. Now with the wires on the left, I've actually got the glue making the wires come out straight, which is better. On the back, on the right hand side here, they're poking a bit down, which isn't so good. So I'm actually going to put a spot more glue on just to have them coming, just to make sure that they're coming out this way. So I'm actually going to put some glue on the bottom of the wire. So I'll put some there. Just let that cool off for a moment. Then I'll do the same with the red wire. Let that cool. Okay, just like the back, we need to make 4 holes. So I'll just zoom in. There we go. So behind the terminal block here, we want 4 holes for the motor wires to come up. Using the 1.8mm drill bit again, I'm going to put one there. Get bits of plastic out of the way. Turn it upside down. What you notice actually is that there's some trimming out which has been done, so we need to do the same on both sides. The first thing that we're going to do is there are these little protrusions here which we're not going to need anymore, so I'm going to trim those off with a Stanley knife. It's quite hard to do on video, so let's just do those, keeping the fingers out of the way at all times obviously. Keep going until you can't feel those at all. So there's one on this side. That's nice and smooth. Just get the last bit out with this knife. That's it. And then there's one on the other side here. That's nice and smooth too. And then if you look here, this piece here is a couple of millimeters further out than this little moulded ridge here. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to slice straight down there. Use the Stanley knife, it's easier. Having a new blade in this, or a relatively new blade, will make this much easier. And we slice it all the way to the bottom, and then we cut across there. And then we're going to do some dremeling. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to trim everything out of this block here up to here. And then on the front, going up to this ridge here, we're going to trim out kind of around like that. Okay. Make it nice and smooth using the craft knife. And that should be about right. And now we should in theory be ready to put in our front axles. So get hold of the springs and put those back in their holes, like that. Take the front axle, remembering which way round it goes, i.e. with that little bit sticking out at the front there, and we put on the steering rack, so that's going to go in there and in there. Make sure that it's moving nice and freely, which it is. Take the wires and post those through the holes that we just made. Actually, I'll take the springs out for a moment because we're likely to be tipping it upside down and then we'll lose the springs. So we're going to post these wires and just make sure that the wires for each side of the motor go in the holes corresponding to that, because that way you'll know which wire is which when it's coming out of the other end. So I'll just post those through. Okay, so now the moment of truth. Get the springs, pop them in the holes, and what we're going to be wanting to do is to locate these two bits here onto the springs, and at the same time we're going to want to locate this bit here into the little box that the servo moves around for the steering. And while we're doing all of this, we want to make sure that the wires aren't snagging on the springs. So I may need to pull the wires periodically just to make sure that they're going through the holes. Right, so I'm going to start by locating this back bit in the hole, like so, and then get the springs into these pieces. That, and then just gradually move it into place. Having got it rested here, I'm just going to have a quick tug on the wires, just gently, just to make sure that they're reasonably straight, and then it will just click into place. Just a gentle pull on the wires to make sure that they're okay, and I think that we're good. So let's just check that. So the front axle moves nicely left and right like that, and it moves up and down, and you'll notice how these plastic bits here are just on the outside of the templates that we put on, and it's the same on the back here, and that helps keep the axle nice and aligned and not moving around. But it's very free to move, and I think that that's a perfect job. So that is that bit done. Probably time for another cup of tea before we move on to doing the wheels.